24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News. President Yoon embarks on a trip to Lithuania for an array of diplomatic meetings at the NATO summit. Talks with the Japanese Prime Minister are also scheduled on the sidelines ahead of the planned Fukushima water release next month. President Yoon stresses it's time for the international community to show that its will to stop North Korea's nuclear initiative is stronger than the regime's will to develop such weapons. This amid South Korea and the U.S. being set to hold their first joint nuclear consultative group meeting in Seoul later this month. South Korea's rival parties continue to clash over Japan's Fukushima water discharge plan, despite the IAEA chief's visit to the National Assembly over the weekend to address public anxiety. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. South Korean President Yoon is on his way to Lithuania to attend the NATO summit where he'll hold a series of diplomatic meetings. His itinerary will also include a summit with the Japanese Prime Minister, during which they're likely to address the Fukushima water release set for next month. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon leads us off.
President Yoon makes a return to a NATO summit this week as he looks to bolster two-way cooperation between the 31-member alliance and the Indo-Pacific region, with the war in Ukraine high on the agenda. This is Yoon's second appearance at the multilateral summit after participating last year in what was a first for a South Korean president.
The president will lay out South Korea's contribution to peace in Ukraine, one of the most important issues for the international community, and will concretely set forth our global responsibility diplomacy.
According to an official at the top office, Seoul and NATO will adapt a new document to institutionalize cooperation in 11 areas, including non-proliferation, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. Yoon will also meet with NATO Secretary General on Tuesday and has at least 10 confirmed sideline bilateral meetings arranged through Wednesday. This includes one with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida, which is highly anticipated considering the recent release of an IAEA report saying Japan's plan to release Fukushima nuclear wastewater into the Pacific meets international standards. A top office official said the two leaders will likely discuss the matter as it's an important issue for the region, but Seoul's position remains unchanged, putting people's health as the utmost priority. Yoon will also moderate a four-way summit with the Asia-Pacific 4 nations, including Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. This also comes as South Korea formally opened a permanent mission to the organization in Belgium last November. South Korea and NATO officially formed a partnership in 2006 based on shared values of freedom and democracy, but have sped up cooperation recently with uncertainties across the globe. And the two see mutual benefit from the partnership.
We are, of course, concerned about the reckless missile tests and the nuclear programs of North Korea, and the war in Ukraine has also ramifications for your region. And we also know that North Korea is providing military support to the Russian war efforts with rockets and missiles, and this just highlights how we are interconnected.
In the meantime, Yoon will have one eye on China's reaction to his NATO appearance as the superpower slammed the president's previous summit involvement, pointing to a NATO strategic concept from 2022 that puts pressure on China by saying the alliance faces, quote, systematic competition from Beijing. However, the South Korean government has not budged from its stance that its diplomatic activity does not exclude any particular state. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
This year's meetup for NATO members in Lithuania will likely range from the prolonged war in Ukraine to expanding their membership. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji explains.
Russia's war in Ukraine will top the agenda when leaders of NATO member states gather in Lithuania for 2 days starting Tuesday for their annual summit. They will likely discuss Ukraine's NATO membership bid and security guarantees the country will need to ensure that Russia does not again invade the country when current hostilities end, as well as the issue of how to bring Kyiv closer to NATO without it actually joining. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he does not expect his country to be given the green light until after the war, but said he hopes the upcoming summit will give a clear signal on the intention to bring Ukraine into the alliance. In a recent interview with ABC News, the Ukrainian leader said Ukraine would be a valued NATO partner with the strongest armed forces in Europe, and added 90% of Ukrainians want to be part of the security alliance.
We are also working on helping our partners to make some conclusions for this upcoming NATO summit meeting, and I'll be doing whatever I can in order to, so to speak, expedite that solution, to have an agreement with our partners.
While some Eastern European NATO members are suggesting an early timetable to welcome Ukraine, some states such as the U.S. and Germany remain cautious, partly because of fears that moving too quickly on NATO membership could provoke a direct conflict with Russia. In fact, U.S. President Joe Biden told CNN on Sunday, ahead of his critical trip to Europe, that Ukraine was not yet ready to enter NATO, adding that Moscow's war against Kyiv must end before this can be considered. He said he does not think there is unanimity in NATO on the issue at the moment, as the war is still ongoing. Instead, he said he has told the Ukrainian leader that Washington would keep providing security and weapons for Kyiv, as it does for Israel. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Ahead of the NATO summit, President Yoon says that it's time for the international community to show that its will to stop North Korea's nuclear weapons development is greater than the regime's motivation to produce such weapons. This comes as South Korea is set to hold the first nuclear consultative group meeting with the U.S. later this month. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korean President Yoon has pushed the international community to convey its solidarity against North Korea's aggressive nuclear intentions. In a written interview with the Associated Press published on Monday, Yoon said that now is the time to clearly demonstrate that the international community's determination to deter North Korea's nuclear weapons program is stronger than North Korea's desire to develop nuclear weapons. The statement came prior to his departure for the annual NATO summit, where Yoon is expected to stress the importance of international cooperation against North Korea's illegal acts. Yoon also calls for peace through strength, adding that strong international sanctions against North Korea can prevent the advancement of its nuclear and missile capabilities. In line with South Korea's intentions to beef up countermeasures against Pyongyang's evolving threats, Seoul and Washington will be holding their first meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group in Seoul on July 18th. The presidential office announced over the weekend that the meeting will discuss information sharing, a consultation mechanism, and joint planning and execution designed to bolster nuclear deterrence against North Korea. The NCG was established by President Yoon and Biden during their summit in April. Under the group, the U.S. reaffirmed its extended deterrence provided to South Korea. This refers to Washington's commitment to defend its allies by using its military capabilities, including nuclear weapons. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
North Korea says U.S. spy planes have been engaging in, quote, reckless activities such as violating its airspace. A statement by Pyongyang's defense ministry carried by the regime state media on Monday said American drones and spy planes have been flying for several days in a row along its east and west coasts and accordingly raised prospects of shooting down such aircraft. In response, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff also on this Monday denied any American intrusion into North Korean airspace. The Ministry of Unification celebrated the 24th anniversary of its establishment of Hanawon, a government institution that runs a resettlement program for North Korean defectors. At the facility, Minister Kwon Young-se stressed the importance of creating a social environment where defectors could blend in more easily. Kim Mo-kyung reports.
From now on, the government will establish a system that supports the needs of the defectors and also work to create a social environment that embraces defectors from North Korea.
That's what South Korea's unification minister said during his opening remarks to celebrate the 24th anniversary of the establishment of Hanawon on Monday. In order for the government to successfully reach such a goal, Kwon stressed the need for Korean citizens' perception of defectors to be more positive and open. Hanawon, located in Ansong, southeast of Seoul, is a state-run facility that since 1999 has provided a 12-week resettlement education program for new defectors from North Korea. It helps defectors protect their identity, trains them to get used to South Korean society, and supports them financially so that they can be taught how to make a living for themselves. But recent data from the ministry show that the number of defectors dropped significantly from around 3,000 in 2010 to 1,000 in 2012 when Kim Jong-un took power. The figure declined even more rapidly with the impact of COVID-19 reaching only 67 in 2022. According to one female defector who spoke on condition of anonymity, she lived a difficult life in the border area between the two Koreas, and COVID-19 made things even worse, so she decided to come to South Korea with the hope of living a life in a country where human rights were guaranteed.
We learned a lot about South Korea through the inflow of Korean dramas. What motivated me to come is the fact that there's hope for one person to live a better life if one strives for it here.
Other defectors also expressed gratitude to Hanawon for giving them autonomy to choose their own life options. They say the institute carries a lot of significance, as the training that they received there gave them the opportunity to think about what they wanted to do with their lives in the future. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
South Korea's rival parties continue to clash over Japan's Fukushima water discharge plan, despite the IAEA chief's recent visit to the National Assembly to address public anxiety. The government, meanwhile, is gearing up measures to support the fishing industry at home. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo has the latest.
Despite the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi's recent visit to South Korea to address public anxiety, clashing voices among the public continue to clamor. Civic groups and political parties are holding many protests across the country, ranging from a rally organized by environmental and climate groups in the cities of Daejeon, Suwon, and Incheon, to a hunger strike in the city of Changwon, Gyeongsangnam-do Province, led by the main opposition Democratic Party. The DP, which sat down with the IAEA chief at the National Assembly on Sunday to discuss the issue, continues to question the nuclear agency's neutrality. 11 DP and independent lawmakers are on a visit to Japan, holding protests in front of the official residence of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and the House of Councillors. They also delivered a letter of protest to Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority. In contrast, the ruling People Power Party continues to criticize the opposition for, quote, building up public anxiety, denying science, and being intent on political agitation.
We strongly warn the Democratic Party immediately halt the agitation that stems from anti-Japan sentiments.
Meanwhile, the South Korean government on Monday announced new measures to help the nation's fishery industry. The Ministry of Economy and Finance said it's doubling its budget for seafood reserves compared to last year to 175 billion Korean won, or around $134 million. It's aiming to stockpile seafood to redistribute to the market at an appropriate time. Further, there will be loan support for seafood processing companies that need funds to purchase marine products and vouchers for customers to encourage spending on seafood products. The government is also looking into other measures that will be finalized at a later date. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
South Korean cars ranked #1 in eco-friendly vehicle exports to the U.S. in the first quarter of 2023 in terms of monetary value, despite the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. The Korean Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade released a report saying that among EV exporting countries, the total value of these exports came to $2.13 billion in the first 3 months of this year. Korea has remained in the top spot in the U.S. since last year. Even so, the institute said Korea should diversify its export market while establishing measures to strengthen the car industry over the long term. It called for more support from the government for the mobility services and car software sectors amid rising demand for EVs in developing countries. In other news, wrapping up her trip to China, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has reiterated Washington's focus is on de-risking, not decoupling with Beijing. Yoon reports.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen concluded her 4-day visit to Beijing for high-level talks on Sunday as Washington seeks to stabilize relations with China after months of inflamed tensions. Relations between the two countries have been particularly frosty in recent times amid national security issues, including Taiwan, U.S. imposing export bans on advanced technologies, as well as the U.S.'s apparent rallying of advanced economies to counter China's economic coercion. But during her visit to Beijing, Yellen reiterated that the United States is not seeking to decouple from China.
There is an important distinction between decoupling on the one hand and, on the other hand, diversifying critical supply chains or taking targeted national security actions.
She added that such a decoupling would be disastrous for both countries and destabilizing for the world, and that the world is big enough for both of the world's two largest economies to thrive.
We want a dynamic and healthy global economy that is open, free, and fair, not one that is fragmented or forces countries to take sides.
While a single visit is not enough to solve the challenges overnight, Yellen highlighted that the bilateral meetings served as a step forward in efforts to put the U.S. China relationship on surer footing. The two countries remain at odds on numerous issues, and this trip did not result in any specific policy breakthroughs. But Yellen summarized her trip as successful in terms of reestablishing contact, saying she expected increased and more regular communications at a staff level. Such connections are expected to reduce the risk of misunderstanding and pave the way for cooperation in areas such as climate change and debt distress. Later this month, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is scheduled to make a visit to China as the U.S. diplomatic push continues, ahead of a possible meeting between the country's leaders at September's G20 summit in New Delhi or an APEC gathering scheduled for November in San Francisco. Yoon, Arirang News.
Meta's new microblogging app Threads, launched just last Wednesday U.S. local time, has already surpassed 100 million users. That's faster than OpenAI's ChatGPT, which took 2 months to reach the milestone. Founded by Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, Threads is largely a text-based platform where users can have real-time public conversations. With its character limit on posts and the ability to repost or quote others' message, the app is widely being compared to its rival Twitter. It has been launched in 100 countries and in more than 30 languages. A book has been released that looks back at the 10-year journey of BTS. Beyond the Story, 10-year Record of BTS was released on July 9th, the same date its fan base, the ARMY, got its name 10 years ago. Fans all over the world have flocked to local bookstores to get a copy of the 500-page book. There's in-depth coverage and interviews with the members, and fans can read in detail about their journey from trainees to global sensations. It's now available in more than 10 languages, including English, Japanese, and French. Big Hit Music says it's planning to launch the book in 23 languages. K-pop boyband EXO broke their recent hiatus on Monday, releasing their 7th studio album, Exist. After almost a four-year absence, the band's newly dropped album consists of 9 tracks, including the lead-off song Cream Soda. The group's agency, SM Entertainment, says the pop dance track expresses the moment of falling in love as smooth yet thrilling as a cream soda. Pre-orders for the album have reached a record-setting 1.6 million copies as of Sunday. Light rail transit is an efficient type of urban rail transportation. But when built with elevated tracks, its construction requires dense columns, limiting the construction process. South Korean researchers have developed a new technology that increases the distance between these columns up to 200 meters without cables. Jung Eun-ju has more.
Light rail transit, or light rail, is 50% faster than the bus and can carry up to 16 times as many people. Narrow gaps between the pillars of elevated structures used for light railway lines, however, cause traffic congestion and spoil a city's aesthetics. That's why subways are often built even though they're more than twice as expensive to construct compared to elevated light railways. A South Korean research team has developed the world's first elevated light rail structure technology that increases the distance between columns to 200 meters without the use of cables. Unlike the existing method of building pillars and placing the tracks on top, the new method builds the basic frame of the rails in the center. This structure has an integrated upper and lower part which increases the distance between the columns, distributes stress, and prevents drooping. The floor is also built with a new material that is 20% the weight of concrete. Researchers confirmed the structural safety when a load test was done at the most vulnerable central point of the elevated platform, and it did not collapse under a load of up to 430 tons. The structure also did not shake even when subjected to super strong winds of 80 meters per second or an earthquake of 6.5 magnitude.
The distance between the elevated structure pillars are genuinely 3 to 40 meters, but the newly developed structure technology can reach the world's longest span of 200 meters in an urban area.
The upper and lower structures can be prefabricated at a factory. This allows constructors to precisely assemble them in module units on site with special equipment and minimize traffic congestion during construction.
The Korea Railroad Research Institute will further advance the technology through local government demonstration projects, commercialize it, and develop it into a global Korean technology.
The research team has succeeded in verifying the structural performance in real size, and the developed technology is expected to be applied to new South Korean light rails as well as exported overseas. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
South Korea is forecast to see rainy spells this week. Scattered outbreaks of rain are in store nationwide until this Wednesday. For central regions, including the Seoul metropolitan area, monsoon showers are expected for the latter half of the week. Rain will begin overnight. Western regions and Gangwon-do province will see up to 100 millimeters. Parts of Gyeongsang-do province's the east coast and Jeju Island will see 5 to 40 millimeters. When it starts to rain, it will start to batter some regions with torrential downpours. Be extra careful out on the roads. A wet morning is expected nationwide. Tomorrow, Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 24 degrees Celsius. Daytime temperatures will feel hotter than the actual readings due to increased moisture levels in the air. Seoul will get up to 28 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 29, Busan will be reaching 27 degrees. For the time being, frequent showers are expected. Make sure to have your umbrellas handy until early next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Monday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow. Hope everyone has a good start of the week.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.